What you're about to watch is my interview with the brilliant Sasha Dikishin, also known to many as Sonic Mayhem. You may know him from his work on Quakes 2 and 3, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Mass Effect 3, Injustice, The Long Dark, and so many more incredible video games that have come out over the past few decades. In this interview, we'll talk about his recent work on the dystopian cyberpunk FPS game Metal Eden, his past work on Quake 2, and get into his history in composing music in the video game industry and beyond. With that said, I do want to let all of you know that when we filmed this interview, I was still coming out of an incredibly awful sickness and had a wicked cough the entire time. I don't know what it was, some kind of respiratory thing, but I could barely get a couple of words out in a row without coughing. Now, Sasha, being the charming individual he is, wasn't fazed by this at all and didn't seem to even notice. But I couldn't get past it, so in order to avoid distracting all of you throughout the interview, I've opted to cut out all of my audio and re-record all of my questions on the back end. I then reformatted the whole interview structure to focus entirely on Sasha's answers, all of which are eloquent and exceptional. So, with all of that said, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Sasha Dikishin, aka Sonic Mayhem. Welcome, Sasha. Thanks for joining me. I hear you're in Berlin. How has that been?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. And this is kind of like what I do every couple of months. I have a family here in Berlin, and I work out of LA. And so I just have to travel like 3, 4 times a year to just, take care of some family business and just be here, Christmas time, be with the family. And but it's all good. I got a little workstation here. I can work as well, So yeah, it's been cold but fun.
I see you composed only some of the soundtrack for the recent cyberpunk FPS Metal Eden. How did that come about, and how much did you compose alongside their in-house composer who also worked on the soundtrack?
It's a good question. Actually, the in-house composer is it's Violetta, and she's awesome. The way it happened was, this happens once in a blue moon. I was just on Twitter back then. It was called Twitter still, and I saw something about the futuristic first-person shooter, and then I realized it's the same company who also did Runer, which was this top asymmetrical cyberpunk game, sort of like old school style, like Crusader in the 90s, like super. I mean, it was so good and the music was great. And I thought I wanted to align myself with companies like that, with something more unique than, the typical stuff that you kind of expect. And so I hit them up and I said I would be interested in writing some music for your game. And they were interested. I was in Europe at the time as well, so I flew to Poland, where they're based from. Got to meet the whole team, and of course, lo and behold, they're all Quake 2 fans. I know, and they all had this weird look on their faces, and I was just like, "Oh, guys, this is too weird. Come on, I'm just a normal person. Just relax." And yeah, I got along with these people really well. And then the concept behind it was that I would pretty much write tracks that are sort of more used in the combat. The idea behind it was less of a score, but more of tracks that they could license for the game. Kind of like imagine like the Matrix movie, right, where they licensed all these tracks for the action sequences. And Violetta took care of the score for the game, of the more cinematic stuff. And yeah, it was a like a fairly long process to just find that sound, like it always is for these particular games, and it just worked out, and it just tells you that sometimes to approach people over Twitter, it doesn't really matter, it's like it never hurts, just to ask.
So, your contributions to Metal Eden are both part of the score and also part of an original Sonic Mayhem licensed soundtrack inspired by the world of Metal Eden?
It's actually the tracks that are on the soundtrack are actually in the game as well. So they were written for the game, with the exception that for a lot of the soundtracks, when you work, it's a buyout, right? So if you work, let's say on a Call of Duty game, there is no way you're going to keep the rights to your music. And so I got into the point where I said, I want to work on projects that I like, that are musically somewhat different, not in the typical vicinity of orchestral, Marvel to be expected, the boring stuff. And I also, so I wanted to do my own thing, but I also said I want to take these tracks and release them on my own terms later on, almost like an artist album, right? So the headline or the tagline for this is part artist manifesto, part soundtrack. That's pretty much what it is. So it's inspired because I do have a couple of newer tracks on there that are not in the game. And I also have a few remixes actually by Gunship, who some of your viewers might be familiar with. They're like the synthwave band, and Power Glove. And so I wanted to just do something a little bit different, but it's no different than, let's say, for example, what's a good example? Tron with Nine Inch Nails, because they approached it as the band Nine Inch Nails, and they're using the music in the movie, of course, but it's also like an album, if you will, right? So um, that was the idea behind it actually all along. And just to extend on that, there is going to be an official soundtrack that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks, which has her works as well, the cinematic stuff. And there's going to be, hopefully around December 18th, there's going to be it's called Corrupted Memory Edition, which has the extra tracks and the remixes on it.
It's both a video game soundtrack and a complete Sonic Mayhem album in one.
It's to add to that, usually when I do something that's more of a score, okay, let's say, for example, The Long Dark, right? It has more ambient stuff, or the dystopica stuff. I use my real name as the composer because it's more of a score. It's not really like tracks, there could be songs with vocals on them and stuff like that. So when I use Sonic Mayhem, which I've been using ever since Quake 2, is when I feel like this is more like, my own thing, my own project, really, with the music that I want to make. Because a lot of times for games, it's just like movies, you have to make, I mean, of course, the music has to fit the game. It's a given. But a lot of times you have to let go a little bit of your ego and have to just, if they want a certain sound, if they want a shade of blue, you're not going to give them a shade of pink. You know what I mean? So a lot of times I use my real name for that, but then I decided I use the Sonic Mayhem monk here when I'm really in my element, and it's got guitars on it. It's got, everything is electronic and heavy. And that's when I decide to use my Sonic Mayhem monk here, and usually it's always a buyout. So the fact that you can license the tracks, you make a deal, and I get to use them for something else is like you said, it's great.
Did you have any inspirations during your composition of the Metal Eden record?
Yeah, usually the beginning of a project is always the hardest part. You kind of, you start with a blank canvas. You kind of obviously know it's cyberpunk, and you don't. I first know what I don't want to sound like. So you got Cyberpunk 2077. They have their own thing, and that's great. It sounds amazing, and I love all those guys there. And but I don't want to be that. I don't want to be Tron. What do I want, right? And so the next step is, of course, I listen to what they doing for the game, what the story is about, and then I listen to a bunch of inspirational stuff that I might cruise in my library. And I did actually, for this project, Prodigy wasn't necessarily the main inspiration. If you believe it or not, it was more hip hop. It was more, yeah, it was more trap than anything else. I think if you listen to all the tracks, and later on you will be able to listen to them, they're all about 90 beats per minute to like 110 beats per minute. So that's a very slow tempo for combat tracks, right? Which I wanted to have like this heavy groove. And I think, I can't remember of this one song. There is a video of this guy riding motorcycles in this roundabout. and it was like a viral hit earlier this year. Some rapper, I don't remember, but it was super good, and that really set off the whole inspiration behind Metal Eden. Except sound wise, of course, with a palette that's much more heavy and inspired by the likes of the Prodigy, and even maybe a little Rage Against the Machine, and even some metal stuff. But I always wanted to stay away from cliche. So there's a couple of breakdowns in these tracks, and they go into that kind of era. But to me, it would have to be I have to surprise myself, and that's very hard to do. I have to find a sound, whether that's a drum sound, a bass sound, something that catches my attention, where I say that could be the sound for the game. For example, in my video, as you saw, I talk about that bass sound, which maybe goes next into your next question. I don't know, but that's the kind of evolution that I'm looking for. So I'm finding something that inspires me and then you mix that together with the sort of slower trap hip hop vibes, but make it not hip hop.
So Metal Eden Corrupted Memory Edition will launch around December 18th.
It was supposed to come out earlier, actually, but we had to delay a little bit. I had to give the remixes a little bit more time. And I'm also here, as I'm here in Berlin, I'm actually shooting a promo for it in the next couple of days, which should be interesting. So a little bit more visual artistry, just like using the time here to do something creative. And I'm excited for people to hear it. I mean, it's, like with everything I do, I put my heart in it and give it my all and hope that it resonates with people. Yeah, like the 18th or the 19th, something like that. Shortly before the holidays. I mean, hopefully that's a good release window. I guess so. People get off work and have time to listen to music. I don't know.
So the album will be out exclusively on Bandcamp, but not on regular streaming services like Spotify.
Yes, I still get the questions. Why is there not more music on Spotify? And I know that you already did your research, obviously. That's correct. So it will be bandcamp.sonicmayhem.com. And there will also be a digipack available, like a physical release, because I'm a huge fan of physical media, which will have featuring some artwork. Certain images were glitched by Rob Sheridan, who also was the art director of Nine Inch Nails. Some people might know. Yeah, yeah. It's the whole package. It's like, to me, it's important to get away from streaming, from the, I'll just click and listen and then skip or whatever. I want people to get the full experience with the art, because I'm doing all the art myself as well. And I grew up with it, in the 90s and the 2000s, so yeah.
I then had to show him my Quake tattoo and nerd out for a little bit.
Oh, damn, okay.
Okay, so we have to talk about Quake 2. How did you wind up composing for the soundtrack on that?
Okay, let me rewind my brain to about 1996. And I know there's a lot of, stories on the internet about how it happened, and people said, "Oh yeah, Trent wasn't into it," and it's all not true. They were basically interested in a completely different direction than Quake 1, and the methods of destruction was sort of like a Quake 1 add-on that I sold out of my apartment. And people have to remember, people have to send me a check for $10, and there was no online credit cards or anything like that, right? So, and they did get this on their desk. I remember Mike Wilson, who was the CEO of it at the time, got this copy, but I'm not sure if it had anything to do with it, because one night, and the older viewers might know the chat called MRSC. Maybe you even remember it. I don't know. You seem fairly young. This was basically, just imagine like a Discord, but really, really basic. And it looked like MS-DOS Windows. And and id Software had a channel on it called id Software. So I one night went into the channel, and there happened to be one of the id guys was there. And what happens was on the right side of the screen, you would see the names and you could just double click and another window would open and you could message them. So I messaged one of the guys. I said, "Hey, I'm so and so. Do you have anybody for music for Quake 2?" And they answered, "No, we don't." And then they were asking, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh, I'm an upcoming musician based in LA, and I'm a huge fan, and I have something for you." They gave me the address. I had to send in a burned CD to Texas. I sent in the CD, and the demo that we did, the first demo that I did for Quake 2, was actually much more in the likes of Terminator 2 because of the stroke, of the whole. It was much more. I remember going outside, recording, hitting on trash and metal, and using that in a really rough form. Back then before there were plugins, and building this sort of like Terminator 2 inspired score. It was really not a song or nothing metal at all. Even though we were huge metal fans and we all played guitar and all that stuff, but I wouldn't dare at the time to submit anything like heavy metal, rock, or whatever. So we sent that to him. They loved it. They called back 2 weeks later and asked, "Well, can you do something more metal, rock inspired?" I said, "Sure." We went back, wrote another track, and I believe that track is not on the final soundtrack. No. And I got a call back 2 weeks later. I don't remember who it was. And they said, "If you want the job, you got it." And that was the power of the internet and the power of chatting with id Software in 1996, 97, I think, early 97, right? And that's how we got that job. That was it.
Banging on metal with pipes. Sounds very 90s industrial.
Oh, yeah. Like I was thinking Einstürzende Neubauten, almost like very like German industrial, and I wish I could find that demo. I have it somewhere. And I always wanted to release it on my YouTube channel, like the first ever. It's on some of the old DAT tapes. It's an old format. I don't have a player for it, but at some point next year, I'm going to go back and look for it.
I think we would all love to hear that demo.
For sure. Yeah.
Before Quake 2, you composed an entire Quake 1 soundtrack replacement for players to enjoy a heavier alternative soundtrack in the background of Quake called Methods of Destruction. Did this record have anything to do with you getting the gig on Quake 2?
I was always so for those who don't know, have always been a gamer since the Commodore 64 in like the 80s. I went through the Amiga 1000 was like my first big purchase in 86. I got the Atari ST where I started, music first on it. And so the gaming part was always there, but it wasn't until Quake 1 where I thought about, okay, wait a minute. All this time, and people have to remember, this was a time when before Quake, we still had games that used the Sound Blaster for MIDI music. And it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like something that inspired me, right? With that cheesy orchestral MIDI music. And so when Quake 1 came out, I just happened to finish university at that time, 96. And of course, we were huge fans, like I remember going to E3 at the time and meeting all the guys. And when I played it, I realized the music was streaming off the CD. And I was like, how does that work? That's crazy. That means I could actually write real music and play it with the game. Because remember, the first track is the data track, and the other tracks are like Redbook audio. So it's like a CD, like an audio CD. And so that blew my mind. And I remember vividly going into my car, driving around in LA on the West Side, and just my brain went off. I'm like, this has got to be the future of games, like real music, no more MIDI. And that's how I started Methods of Destruction. It was sort of like an add-on for Quake to see what I could do at the time. And that's really how I got into the idea and the idea of I wasn't even planning to work on Quake 2. It's just, the news came out, Quake 2, everybody was in the chat, and I saw one of the it guys, and by pure chance, I could have been, okay, I'm hungry. I go into the kitchen, I could have missed it, and I would have never scored it, right? And it just happened so that I clicked on his name and asked him. That was it.
You previously left a comment on my Quake 2 retrospective about how ambient tracks to play when not in combat were at one time being considered for the game. Can you expand on that?
It was actually, I don't think the it guys were very interested in that concept. So our idea, or my idea at the time was, okay, we write these hard hitting tracks, they have constant guitars on it. But also being a gamer, I knew that I'm like, so what happens when you don't fight animals, when you're just hunting keys and you're trying out things? And I said to them, what about if we make, based on each heavy track, we make an ambient version of it? So if there's a certain melody or key, that we keep that so it flows into it. It was just at the time, it wasn't possible to do interactive audio. This was 97. They wanted tracks streaming off the CD, and to switch quickly back and forth would have meant there would have been a pause, and it would have maybe skipped. And I think it was one phone call, and they said no. And it was just, I don't think it's a shame, because it is what it is for the time. I think we did the best we could, but if I had to do it today, I would do it differently, of course.
I would have loved to hear how those tracks affected the world of Quake 2.
I would have loved, and also I don't think there was enough money. They didn't want to spend a lot of money, so I dropped the idea quickly, because I'm not going to offer something, to do something for free that requires a lot of work at the time, and so unfortunately, yeah, it just is what it is now. But that was an idea that I had at the time, right?
So, you recently released 2 free albums full of unused, unreleased music from Deus Ex Mankind Divided that you had previously composed, called Fragments of the Machine. What inspired this action?
Good question. I think the main drive was that I just realized over the course of time that there is a vast interest of music for Deus Ex, because people have, they ripped out all of the music. Of course, they do these 1 hour meditations, sort of like, or even longer than that, of the tracks repeating themselves over and over again. And then there was, I think 2 years ago, 2023 or 3 years ago, they were trying to resurrect Deus Ex, the company, and they were asking me to pitch for it, which I was, sort of apprehended at the time, because I thought, well, guys, I worked on your game for a year and a half. Do I really have to prove myself again? But I already could see the dark clouds coming, so I did not. But it reminded me, okay, let me listen to the old stuff. And I went into the folder. This was last year, and I saw all these. I mean, I cannot even. If I would scroll in the file directory of the drive, it would just scroll for like a minute, because there were so many folders. And I just realized, there's so many good tracks that were either not used, or there were variations of tracks that never made it in the game, or it was tracks that were just never released. Like, for example, the club tracks, they weren't on the soundtrack, right? So I just went back in it and I said, okay, how can I get this out? And obviously, for legal reasons, I can't sell them. That seems to be pretty clear. And I thought, why not just give them away? I mean, that's literally my thought was not to gain anything from it. I was just like, it's a shame if the music is sitting on my hard drive and nobody can hear it. And so, because the whole point of making music is for people to enjoy it, right? I mean, and the thing was, I haven't listened to the tracks since. If they would have not lived up to my expectations, I would have never released them, because I didn't touch them, right? The way you hear it is the way they are in the folder at the time. And I came up with this name, not to use necessarily Deus Ex, just a different name to get them out, to kind of stay out of legal trouble in case, and just give them away to the community. I mean, that's and I'm so glad people enjoy them because these tracks were a lot of work, and it's interesting to hear them after all this time. How much interest is still there, and so I still cannot believe that they are not continuing. Adam Jensen's adventure. To me, it's baffling. I do not know the drama that happened, why it exactly didn't happen, but it's sort of like hard to understand, kind of like Half-Life 3. Like, why does that not happen? Or like a new Quake, why is that not happening? It's like so obvious that people want it, but so at least I thought I get the music out. Maybe it helps to gain some interest again, or maybe having people realize how good those games were. And I have to give a shout out to Mike McCann, of course, who was, a great sort of collaborator during Deus Ex, because he, helped me because I had to kind of match that sound at the time a little bit and infuse it with my own. And so we had many great phone conversations, and I'm hoping maybe he will release some unreleased tracks as well. I don't know. Yeah, it would be great.
You mentioned you're a gamer. Can you tell us a few of your all-time favorites?
Um, Favorite games. Okay, the first that comes to mind is Monkey Island. Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. It's my absolute. I love these old LucasArts puzzle games. Actually, Zork Nemesis, the Zork series was just amazing. Of course, I love a lot of the first person shooters. I even remember playing Sin, Half Life, Quake, of course. Battlefield. I've always been a fan of Battlefield, and yeah, so many. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, in the '90s, it was a lot more adventure games, and there is a little of that at the moment, unfortunately. So I'm more into the first person shooter action games, but I think those are like some of my favorites when I think about it. And there's a few on the Amiga, Defender of the Crown. This is like super old, 86. Cinemaware did those. Defender of the Crown, Archon. This was like this chess game with monsters. It was amazing. Yeah.
I recently did a retrospective video talking about the PlayStation 1 video game adaptation of 007 Tomorrow Never Dies. And I noticed you were credited as having worked alongside composer Tommy Tallarico. How involved were you on that soundtrack?
Oh man, that's actually a story. I don't know if I'm going to get into trouble or not, but I really don't care because I always say what I think, which gets me into trouble in return. But we actually, I back then was contacted by Tommy and his agent. It was like after, I think it was during the Quake 2 era. I'm sorry, Quake 3 in '99. And we were supposed to do like a theme and a bunch of other tracks, but with our style, And so I remember presenting the developer or the publisher with the Bond theme that's on there, right, with the heavy guitars. There is one. And they were like all sitting there like, I mean, this was like the most uncomfortable meeting with 10 people listening to this, thinking this is the greatest piece of shit I've ever heard. They did not get it at all, right? So there was like this complete silence. And all the other tracks, we did a couple of ambient tracks. And so what happened was Tommy's original score was completely different. But after he heard our tracks, not only did we not get paid the fair amount that we were supposed to get, but he also copied our sound in a way and then just gave himself the credit for the whole thing, right? So, I mean, not to knock at Tommy totally. Tommy, if you're watching this, I still love you, brother, but that was not cool back then. We're kind of like a little bit used as the newbies on the block. And it was kind of to me funny because I heard the soundtrack before our involvement, what he wrote, and after, and it was very, very different. It was, yeah.
I noticed several of the tracks were unusually heavy with thrashy guitar riffs.
Those tracks exactly are ours, but they were not credited to us. And so that's the thing. It was kind of like, just hiring people, for a little bit of money and then getting the most out of it. And I mean, that was as far as I remember, pretty much the deal. And at the end, we were just like, yeah, whatever, you know. Yeah, yeah, it happens, you know. I mean, people use you, you know, all the time when you're hot or people, you know, you're up and coming, you know. Yeah, absolutely.
That heavy rendition of the 007 theme is so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun doing that score with the guitar. I remember uh, at the time with my partner back then, David Alexander, who I don't work with anymore, but I worked with him on Quake, on the Quake games and the Bond thing. And I remember playing the guitar and him on the floor, timing the wah pedal in the right moments, because I was doing some other stuff with my feet as well. Anyways, it was really fun, but I think afterwards it was like a reality check a little bit. People all, you know, seemed so nice, but then in the end we didn't even get credited for some of the tracks, right? So yeah, I mean, that's, I'm gonna get in trouble for that, but that's what we're here for, right? Gossip, gossip, right?
Sonic Mayhem, by your own description, is a project about rebellion.
Viva la rivoluzione. Exactly, yeah.
Thank you so much for agreeing to have this interview with me. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you so much, Evan. I appreciate it. Thank you. No, just, you know, thanks for having this interview. Really appreciate it. And, you know, everybody go check out the DSX music. Is still for free on Bandcamp. And like you said, go on my Bandcamp December 18th and support the independent artists. If you can, cancel Spotify. It's no good. I know it's convenient, but it's no good. Trust me on that. Do your research and peace.
Thanks for tuning in from my interview with Sasha Dikishin, aka Sonic Mayhem. It was a genuine pleasure to sit down with someone who honestly has indirectly been a part of my life since I was a child. I grew up playing Quake 2 and Mass Effect and Injustice, and also I've been a huge Deus Ex fan for probably 2 decades at this point. I don't want to say I was starstruck, but I was a little starstruck. And also, he is such a pleasure to talk to, and I have talked to him since about maybe getting him back for a follow-up interview, one where I'm not sick and coughing throughout the entire thing, and it can be a proper back-and-forth conversation, and I'm thinking about focusing it entirely on Quake 3, since we weren't able to get to any questions about Quake 3 in this interview. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in seeing down in the comments. Please check out the description and follow that Bandcamp link to find and purchase Sonic Mayhem's Metal Eden Corrupted Memory Edition. It features a lot of really cool remixes and some seriously heavy electronic combat music to score your gym sessions or just background gaming music. Part of me is a little bummed about the whole audio issue, but maybe things happen for a reason, and this is an excuse to try to get it back on the channel again in the near future. Thanks again to everyone for watching. Please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I'm always looking out for different creators I can bring on for CreatorCast and interview about their different contributions to the video game industry, music industry, or whatever. It's a podcast series about interviewing creators and artists, and I've got a couple of people in mind for who I might want to interview next, so make sure you stay tuned. And I would like to thank Sasha again for agreeing to come on and do this interview with me. He's been something of a personal hero of mine for a long time. I love to make music, typically with a heavy industrial grunge feel, much like the Quake 2 soundtrack, so this was a real treat for me. Thank you so much for coming on board, Sasha. And thank you to the viewers for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next one, but until then, that's all I've got for you.